Welcome to Photos and Travel, a show that introduces you to fascinating places around the world. Please welcome our host and tour guide, Jonathan van Bilsen.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Photos and Travel, where we bring the world to your doorstep. A small island off the southern coast of India is home to more than 21 million people and features some of the most picturesque vistas on Earth. Formerly known as Ceylon, Sri Lanka is a fantastic destination to visit, and I look forward to sharing some of the most beautiful sights with you right after these messages. Like any country, Sri Lanka has numerous large cities, and most adventures begin within its capital of Colombo. With just under 1 million inhabitants, it's a modern city which is growing at a fast speed. Traffic wreaks havoc, and most tourists are anxious to head out to nearby Negombo, a much more restful oceanside town with beautiful hotels and some interesting sights. Upon my arrival in Sri Lanka's capital city of Colombo, I was met by my guide Dash from Drive with Dash, as well as our driver Manju. This city is located on the ocean and fishing boats can be seen along the shore. The Galle Green, a promenade for locals and tourists alike, is a wonderful place to stroll along the Indian Ocean. While touring the city, I had my very first taste of Sri Lankan life, driving amid tuk-tuks and some very hectic traffic. Sri Lanka was greatly influenced by the Europeans. It was first settled by the Portuguese, but in the mid-1600s, the King of Sri Lanka signed a treaty with the Dutch East India Company to rid them of the Portuguese. The Dutch ruled the island nation for 150 years. This building is still known as the Dutch Hospital, although it's now been converted into shops and restaurants. The island was named Zeeland by the Dutch, which means land surrounded by sea. During the British occupation, which started in 1800, the name of the island was anglicized to Ceylon, as that's how the Brits thought the Dutch were pronouncing it. In 1972, when the island became independent, they kept the same name, Land Surrounded by Sea, which in Sinhalese translates to Sri Lanka. We left Colombo for the seaside town of Negombo, located 40 kilometers north along the coast. I was happy to see my hotel, the Paradise Beach, as the flight to Sri Lanka was long and tiring. After a stroll along the beach, it was off to bed for a comfortable night. The next morning we drove past beautifully decorated temples and churches, and headed north along the coast to visit the first of several expansive wildlife refuges, Wilpatu National Park. The unique feature of this park is the existence of willows, which are natural sand-rimmed water basins or depressions that fill with rainwater. There are just over 100 lakes in the park, which is roughly 30 by 50 kilometers in size. Although there are said to be a few dozen leopards, spotting one is next to impossible. I had to settle for spotted deer, happily grazing in the bushes, a few monitor lizards, which are abundant in Sri Lanka, and hundreds of wild peacocks. After a short rain shower, we watched a star tortoise cross the road. After a long day of trekking, I was glad to settle into the Hotel Alakamanda in Anuradhapura. Manju drove me along some very rough roads to visit a small village where I was treated to some freshly picked coconuts. I had an opportunity to spend time in a small boat and meet the locals who spent most of their time fishing. One gentleman stopped to make me a small floral bouquet from water lilies. When I returned to shore, Manju, my driver, had disappeared, but had arranged for me to travel in a different style of transportation. Once back on the main road, Dash and Manju picked me up and we drove through Anuradhapura, one of northern Sri Lanka's largest cities with a population of 50,000. After watching a tree being cleared from the road and a vulture enjoying a coconut, Dash decided I should try my luck at snake charming. We stopped to watch a procession, which was interrupted by a few not-so-friendly dogs. I was given a demonstration of flower weaving and felt I was being watched during the entire process. I came upon a very special fig tree, which is said to be the southern branch from the historical Sri Mahabodhi in India, under which Buddha attained enlightenment. It is considered very sacred by Buddha's followers. The majority of people in Sri Lanka are Sinhalese, who originated in India in the 500s BCE. They practice Buddhism and represent 75% of the population. The foliage in this area is very interesting, and some of the plants eat insects if they get too near. After visiting the reclining Buddha, a monument to Buddha's first enlightenment, I continued on to explore the very famous Kutampukuna Twin Pools archaeological site. One of the best specimens of bathing tanks in Sri Lanka, these pools were built when Anuradhapura was an ancient kingdom. The entire complex dates back to the 8th century CE. I continued my trek through northern Sri Lanka, stopping at the ancient kingdom city of Polonnaruwa, one of the best planned archaeological relic cities in the country. The ruins are also known as the Cave of Spirits of Knowledge and are one of the most important Buddhist shrines. It takes the form of 3 colossal Buddha images carved out of a granite cliff. Most prominent is the standing image, 7 meters or 23 feet tall. Next to it is an enormous 14 meter or 46 feet reclining Buddha. The history of Sri Lanka is amazing, but so is the wildlife. I was surprised at the number of elephants I discovered in Minneriya National Park. The park was established in 1938 and is home to nearly 700 elephants. Of course, watching baby elephants is always fun. They do not grow tusks until they finish nursing, at about the age of 2. I found it amazing to see how elephants have adapted to their environment. They actually shake the dirt from the roots of the grass before they put it in their mouth. Dash and Manju brought some fruit with them, which I heartily enjoyed while watching the wildlife. Asian elephants differ from their African counterparts in several ways. They tend to be smaller than the African bush elephant and have the highest body point on their heads. The backs tend to be level and the ears are smaller. The Asian elephant is the largest living land animal in Asia. The distinctive trunk of elephants is an elongation of the nose and upper lip combined. The trunk contains as many as 60,000 muscles and is a highly sensitive organ, which serves several purposes. Elephants use their trunks for breathing, watering, feeding, communication, as well as a little playful jousting. Elephants will playfully wrestle with each other using their trunks, but generally use them only for gesturing while fighting. Elephants can manipulate loads of up to 300 kilograms or 660 pounds with their trunk, which can hold about 4 liters of water. We continued driving to my next stop, which was the Golden Temple of Dambulla, a World Heritage Site. The first thing you see is a spectacular temple with dozens of life-size statues leading up to it. I continued on and Dash neglected to tell me there were 364 steps leading up to the 150-meter-high rock. It was hot and I was very glad I had water with me. Plus, there were vendors selling ice cream, which one had to hold on to, as the treat was also favored by other inhabitants. Dambulla is the largest and best preserved cave temple complex in Sri Lanka, with more than 80 documented caves in the surrounding area. Major attractions are spread over 5 caves, which contain statues and paintings related to Buddha and his life. There are a total of 153 Buddha statues, 3 statues of Sri Lankan kings, and 4 statues of gods and goddesses. The caves were first occupied around the 1st century BCE. I stayed at the Sri Lanka Hotel in Kandy, the former capital of Sri Lanka. Unfortunately, the rain prevented me from using the pool, but alternatively, Dash took me to visit the Sri Muthumarian Temple, which is an unbelievably beautiful temple complex painted with amazing detail. It is used by both Hindus and Buddhists and was constructed in 1874. While in the area, I took a little time for shopping, stopping at the Old Village Spice Shop, where I received some interesting information on spices. Next, I visited Handuni's gem store and saw craftsmen at work creating beautiful bracelets, rings, and all types of jewelry. Sri Lanka is known for its beautiful natural wood, and a visit to oak wood carving is a must to see craftsmen at work. The tropical climate of Sri Lanka lends itself to producing unique foliage, and a beautiful 150-acre garden has been developed for people to enjoy over 4,000 species of plants, all in one place. The garden was formed by the British in 1821 on the site of an original temple dating back to 1371. One of the reasons the botanical garden flourishes is the more than 200 days a year of rainfall, and I found carrying an umbrella was a must. One of the signature plants of the garden is the orchid, of which many species thrive under special care. This spectacular garden is enclosed on 3 sides by a large bend in the Mahaweli River. The city of Kandy is located in the center of Sri Lanka and is the home of the Temple of the Tooth Relic, one of the most sacred places of worship in the Buddhist world. The temple itself is located in the former palace complex and is home to a very unique relic, the Tooth of Buddha. Around 300 CE, the tooth relic was smuggled from India to the island of Sri Lanka by a princess and her husband. India was in the midst of turmoil, and it was feared the relic would be destroyed. Upon entering, I was asked to respect the culture and cover my legs with a sarong, which certainly did not add to my fashion statement. Sri Lanka is probably best known for its tea production, which dates back to the early 1800s when Ceylon tea became all the rage. Annual production is $1.5 billion and is the livelihood for tens of thousands of people. I had the pleasure of touring the Glenloch tea plantation and saw the entire process. Most of the tea, surprisingly, is picked by hand. Before visiting Sri Lanka, I had no idea of the number of national parks filled with wildlife that existed in the country. Being a mostly Buddhist nation, it lends itself to spectacular temples and rituals, many of which visitors can share in. When we come back, we'll climb an unusual rock which rises from the earth and offers fantastic views of the countryside. One of Sri Lanka's magnificent wonders is Sigiriya Rock, which rises high above the fertile plains of the Dambulla area. I had the pleasure of not only visiting this national monument, but also managed to spend most of the day climbing to the top. The views were well worth the experience, but the climb was quite strenuous. The rock is located in the center of Sri Lanka with a fortress constructed on top. The massive column rock is 200 meters or 650 feet high and has 1,200 steps, which are mostly made of metal and have been bolted to the side of the cliff. It was not until I began my ascent that I realized how many of the support poles were actually missing. The climb to the top took about 3 hours and the views were spectacular with monkeys everywhere. I watched as the sun began to set and realized I'd better start my 3-hour descent. It was almost dark when I reached the bottom and was surprised at the signage that was posted. Sri Lanka is rich in history, and I was treated to attending a cultural show depicting traditional dress and dances. Sri Lanka is one of the most picturesque countries I've ever visited, and I was blown away by the sheer beauty of the Ramboda Falls area. I stayed at the Ramboda Falls Hotel, located at the base of the waterfall. It was a very short walk to the base of the falls with easy access to view the 100-meter or 330-foot water rushing next to me. I was scheduled to take a train to the city of Ella, and fortunately we arrived a bit early, which left me ample time to visit the city of Nuwara Eliya. Because of its location in the midst of the tea area, it was a great opportunity to purchase local teas at non-tourist prices. Because of a mix-up in schedules, there was no first class available on the train to Ella. As it turned out, the coach class, although not as luxurious, had many passengers who were intent on having a good time, complete with singing and dancing in the aisles. The trip was 3.5 hours with about 15 stops, but I made some new friends, and although Dash was not with me and language was an issue, we still somehow managed to communicate. Dash met me at the train station in Ella, and we drove to Katawata. The 2-hour drive was interesting, and I saw lots of different sights, including an elephant walking along the road. The hotel, however, was a bit different from what I expected. It was an eco-lodge with small individual bungalows, which were quite rustic to say the least. The phone and TV did not work, which was okay, as I was quite tired. I enjoyed a traditional Sri Lankan dish of mac and cheese in the secluded restaurant building. I was the only guest at the hotel, which can be a bit unnerving, but the staff were very friendly and the geckos in the room were a nice touch. The main reason for visiting this area is the Uda Walawe National Park, one of Sri Lanka's largest reserves covering 300 square kilometers or 120 square miles. It is a sanctuary for many animals, including jackals and water buffalo. Uda Walawe is an important habitat for water birds and Sri Lankan elephants, which I never get tired of watching. The park has more vegetation than previous reserves, so spotting elephants is a bit of a challenge, especially driving along very bumpy roads. Some of the many birds and peacocks were wonderful to see. I spent the better part of the day enjoying these amazing animals in their natural habitat and was looking forward to the next day when I was going to visit an elephant orphanage. I chose the Uda Walawe Elephant Transfer Home instead of the more touristy elephant orphanages because it was set in a natural location and elephants can roam into the jungle if they want. But twice a day, they're led to an enclosed area where they're fed lactose-free powdered milk. It is quite cute to watch baby elephants running along the path to get their milk. The facility was established in 1995, and its primary objective is to rehabilitate orphaned elephant calves for ultimate release back into the wild. I continued my Sri Lankan adventure to the southeast corner of the country with a visit to the Tissamaharama Temple Complex located near the Yala Nature Reserve. The drive was interesting and many people were taking advantage of a swim in several roadside lakes. I was very fortunate to visit the area during Poya, the Festival of the Moon. Finding a parking place was an adventure. My driver Manju was able to find us a spot, however Dash had to buy a plate of fruit as payment. The Tisamaharama temple is one of the original Buddha temples in Sri Lanka and was consecrated by Buddha himself. The large dome in the center is known as a stupa and is one of hundreds in the country. They are basically sealed tombs which contain sacred relics of people in the Buddha faith. The full moon festival is important to Buddhists all around the world. During this time, a practicing Sinhalese Buddhist visits a temple for religious observances. Most shops are closed and the sale of alcohol and meat is forbidden. Another great wildlife refuge in the area is Bundala National Park. It is an internationally important wintering ground for migratory water birds in Sri Lanka and harbors 197 different species. Due to heavy rains in the area, navigating the roads is a challenge. However, Manju handled the vehicle very well. I watched carefully while a peacock performed a mating ritual by fanning his feathers to attract a nearby female. Which doesn't always work. Crocodiles frequent the river and lakes and swim leisurely in search of their next meal. I stayed at the Chandrika Hotel, which was very modern with a friendly staff. I met a monitor lizard who seemed to enjoy a morning swim in the pool. I ventured off early to visit the Yala Nature Reserve, also in the area, but on the coast. This area was particularly hard hit during the tsunami of 2004, when the waves came crashing in and reached the top of this rock. More than 35,000 people lost their lives here, and the area is still trying to rebuild after the devastation. The park is arguably the best in Sri Lanka for viewing the most wildlife, especially if you want to see monkeys. Antelopes graze lazily, keeping a constant eye open for predators, and warthogs play in the water. Baby warthogs are vulnerable to predators because their legs are too long to feed and they have to kneel down. Crocodiles can be seen resting under the hot sun, and they normally stay in the same area. And of course, storks are always graceful when they wade in the water. Suddenly, Dash and I were very excited to witness a rare sighting of a sloth bear. En route to Galle, a city on the southwest coast of Sri Lanka, I visited a moonstone mine, which are very difficult to extract from the ground. A large shaft has to be dug into the earth, and stones are brought up with buckets and then sorted by hand in the water. The city of Galle, with its population of 100,000, is a bustling metropolis with lots of activity. It is best known for Galle Fort, the fortified old city founded by the Portuguese colonists in the 16th century. Stone seawalls expanded by the Dutch encircle car-free streets, with architecture reflecting the Portuguese, Dutch, and British eras. Walking through the area was interesting, as it was the first real European influence I had seen. Small shops and restaurants were everywhere and catered to visitors from within the country and abroad. I was intrigued to see fishermen sitting on poles alongside the road and asked Manju to stop the car while I investigated. To me, it seemed like a very tedious way to fish, but I'm sure donations from tourists for photos make it worth their while. Sri Lanka suffered during its civil war, which began in 1983 when the Tamil Tigers fought the government to create an independent state. After the 26-year war campaign, the Sri Lankan military defeated the Tamil Tigers in May of 2009, bringing the civil war to an end. Peace has prevailed, and the country is back on track to rebuild. On my last day of my 2-week adventure through the island country of Sri Lanka, I took a boat ride on the Maduganja River. It was a peaceful trek with an opportunity to see local fishermen and an abundance of birds. We stopped at Kathdua Island, a small, well-maintained island where a monk lives alone. He gave me a tour of the monastery, and I was quite impressed with the artwork. I continued my boat ride exploring the lake before heading to the airport to say farewell to this surprisingly amazing country. I hope you enjoyed our visit to Sri Lanka, a country lush with vegetation, unique in its religious followings, and spectacular for viewing elephants and other wildlife. Its rich history dates back 3,000 years and has evidence of prehistoric human settlements dating back at least 125,000 years. For Photos and Travel, I'm Jonathan van Bilsen. It's been my pleasure to have been your tour guide today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. If you like this program, please click the subscribe button and you'll never miss an episode.